Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thank you for joining me here today. My name is Jeannie Sanders. I'm with General Code, and I'll be your host for today's webinar. When the stay-at-home order happened, or at very least, we were all told we had less access to our offices, limited access for the public to come and go, limited access for us to come and go. We found ourselves here at General Code talking a lot about what are you hearing? How are people coping? What are they doing? What are their challenges? What's going well for them? So because this became such a common theme, I started to write down some of those questions. And as I came across folks, I would ask them these very questions. And so in our webinar here today, what I'm going to be doing is jumping an awful lot between PowerPoint and in a browser. I'm going to show you some of the solutions that people talked with me about, some of the things they showed me that were working well for them. And we thought that this would be an awesome opportunity maybe to share some of these lessons learned or some of these skills that worked for other people, and maybe you could find a home for it within your organization. Just one other little aside, one of the things that informed me as I was going along is General Code decided at the beginning of this, when we huddled up and said, oh goodness, what are we going to do? The training team decided to host an online office hour of sorts every day. I don't know if you noticed it. Many of you, hopefully on the line, are General Code customers, and you have your e-code with us. And you might have noticed there at the top of the banner where it says your township, it says, have a question about e-code? Join us here from noon to 1 daily. And we did that. So the training team, the whole training team at General Code and I joined folks every day for a long time, many months. And what we were hoping was that people like you would join us. And since maybe you had more time to think about solutions because you didn't have the foot traffic, that you would come in and ask questions about e-code. And some of you did come, and that was awesome. And what we found, though, really, was that many of your constituents came. Now, interestingly, they were disappointed. They wanted it to be you. They were not quite as happy when they saw Kayla and I, but they were thrilled anyone was there for them. And what I really thought it gave us the opportunity to do was to hear from them what they needed, and I could learn about what your challenges were. So that really was the basis of what you're about to see. So let me tell you that I'm going to be showing you a series basically of questions, and I'm going to give you the ideas. When I talk to people, what did they say in response to these questions? So my first one was, what's your biggest lesson learned, your biggest takeaway? What has been your aha moment that, perhaps you might not have guessed in December of 2019? So what bubbled to the top of the list was everything that we had online was a benefit. Everything that I could access once I went home was a benefit. So to give an example of that, I'm going to do my first switch out into the browser. I know that my good friend Kelly is on this webinar because I saw her come in. This is Kelly's e-code, and one of the things that she has done is taken an asset like her Code of Ordinances, which is already available online to her constituents, and made other resources available. So the one I'm going to highlight first is this one right here. Evidently, she gets a lot of calls into the office with people trying to find their specific tax map. So when the offices are closed, it took foot traffic and people being able to get in and get the answers to those questions. She provides them a link right here to go ahead and access. And when they click that link, between all of us, it's there. It was always there, but it might have been hard for some people within the municipality to find this page on the website. So now they have a resource that they know and trust in the code, and at the top of it, it says, hey, click here to access your tax maps. They're brought right to this page. They don't have to know how to negotiate the site, and they see the tax map that they need. I'm going to go back for a second. There was something else about this code that I thought was really interesting, and I honestly don't know when she implemented this, but when you look at her code, there's a number of things, right? She's telling people, look, if you want to access this from your phone, you can. Here's the link for Android, here's the link for Apple, depending on your phone. Another thing I noticed about her code is down in the bottom of it here. She has translation services enabled. Any of us can do that, but she's got it so that, again, during the time when there's more a stay-at-home order, she can try to help the people who need the services. Another thing that people said is sort of the opposite of the first one, but it became painful. Anything that was in the office in static was straight unavailable. So on one hand, people were saying, yeah, I knew that. That wasn't news. But when you have to experience it, oh my goodness, I have to stay home. I need access to this content. How am I going to have to do it? A workaround had to happen. So I felt it important to put both on, not because the second one was news, but it was news in the sense that I didn't maybe perhaps realize how painful it might be. The next common response was technology, the knowledge of it, and experience with that technology were very important assets. So let me switch out and show you something. I'm going to use a town in Rhode Island who utilized it specifically, and you can see again by a note, here's what went on. In Smithfield, they knew, they had the idea, hey, I know I can create a note. I've never done it before. I haven't needed to. Now I need to. We've passed not one, but 2 ordinances regarding COVID, and I want to make sure my folks have access to it. So a couple of things were in play for the town of Smithfield. One, because they had a code where they could upload documents on their own, they didn't have to rely on someone in IT. They didn't have to rely on, maybe they outsourced their IT. They could do the uploading of the documents. It could happen like that. And then the knowledge that, not only could I perhaps put it in miscellaneous documents, but the fact that I could draw attention to it by putting it as a note at the top of the code, all very valuable. So not only understanding what the technology can do, but knowing how to use it was a common theme. And the final thing I thought to include, and you're going to see a note coming up on this because I thought it was so poignant, basically a silver lining to the whole crisis of 2020. And that was, we are a resourceful group. We can get the job done, even when it's not the ideal situation. So in this particular case, they came together as a crowd and figured out what they were going to do. And I have a quote coming up, but what they ended up doing when stuff was, as an example, stuck in the office and it was not available digitally, they made it so that 1 or 2 people could go into the office at off hours so that they could continue to get the job done. And that was really encouraging for them to be able to solve the problems. I'd like to stop for just a minute. Eli, can you get ready for us and post a poll? I'd like everyone on the line to have a look at this. I'm curious, we have a brand new group of people here. I'm not sure I've talked to all of you. What was your biggest takeaway? So I've listed a bunch of things there, many that we had talked about just now. If you could take a minute and click one of those buttons on the screen, let us know for you. And by the way, if you're filling in other, go ahead and use the questions pod or whatever and tell us what that was, right? We won't call you out, so let's make sure everybody's comfortable here. It's just really helpful to hear, based on everyone on the line right now, what were some of your biggest takeaways? And actually, it'd be awesome to hear some ones that didn't bubble up to the top for us. While we're waiting for those results to come in, I'll say your constituents missed you a lot. They were very happy to hear when offices started closing. In that office hour that my colleague and I did, we did through all of August. And when offices started opening up, then we closed it down. And I do kind of miss it, but I know they're very happy that you're back. How are we doing, Eli? Is it about finished? Whenever you think it's a good time, you can go ahead and close that poll. and we can all get a look at that. Awesome. Very interesting. The majority of people on the call today are talking about resourcefulness. That is really awesome. So I'm not looking at the questions area right now. I could be. There we go. It'll be so interesting to hear what people said. So hopefully Eli will begin to tally that for us, and we can talk about that in a little while. Thank you for doing that. All right, I'm going to move on. Sure I am. Yes, I am. And I am going to talk to you a little bit about one of the people in particular that really helped us out a lot with this, the city clerk from the city of Corning, Mary Farmer, who I can also see is on the line with us. And she is the one that really pointed out the resourcefulness. I want to say also a little bit about her situation. She was the one that spoke a fair amount about, wow, when it's not there, you're really face to face with, it's not accessible. The other thing I'll say about that is the accessibility of the data. We came to, as I was talking to people, we came about, well, there's one thing for me to have access to it and be able to get my job done, right? So if you called me and needed, I'll just make something up, you know, a birth certificate, the fact that I could get it done is awesome. But there are other times when there's data that you honestly wouldn't necessarily need me for, but it needed to be accessible to you. So it really was sort of a two-pronged approach there with the availability of data. What do I have access to? What does my general public have access to? So overall theme, being resourceful in really that hammering home of getting data digitized and workflows streamed. So the next question that I'm going to sort of shift to is, okay, we talked about your aha moment. Now let's talk about what was really your biggest strength? What worked well for you during the time? So in this case, I'm going to highlight a different municipality, a gentleman named Chris McClure, and he led with, when I was interviewing him, being prepared. So there is something that happened in the Northeast a couple of years ago called the Columbia gas crisis. Some of you may be aware of it. That really crippled Massachusetts municipalities in a lot of ways. Fast forward to 2020, and it ends up helping them during our current crisis because they were better prepared. I think that many other places that I talked to would say that they were going to be using the crisis of 2020 to prepare them for whatever the emergency is in the future. So being prepared when they worked really well. Another thing that people talked about, in Chris in particular, because he had experience with it, was a strong and trusted social media. What I found when I questioned others on this is they said, well, yeah, we do rely. We use Twitter, we use Facebook, we use our social media accounts. Our constituents know to trust it. And when it comes out from us, then they can. So let's have a look at how that would have been used. I'm just going to open another e-code that has quite a complex, graphically rich sort of code that could answer a lot of questions for developers, business owners that wanted to make some sort of plans for the future in any particular municipality. What if you had a strong and trusted social media presence, then you could take anything from your website. So here I'm going to just select this one little piece of the code which talks about shop front windows and liner buildings and gives people an idea of what they would look like. And I could answer questions by simply clicking on the share button. I can tweet that out. I can share it on Facebook. I can share it on any social media. I can even put a link to this right on my website. And it easily answers questions that could have been more complex. Clearly, your websites and your code books are long and sometimes hard to find the data that you want. When you can put your fingers on it as easily as I just did and share it like that, share a link, people get right to that place in the code. There's no frustration for the people. They don't have to go looking for the content. Another clear result was whole systems that were online. So this is going beyond, you know, a single file, a table of setbacks. We're talking about the whole Megillah, whether it be permitting systems or document management systems or GIS mapping systems. That whole system availability and the ability to show people how to use it was invaluable. So I'm going to highlight yet another municipality that I spoke a lot with, the good folks from Upper Chichester. So here is their code of ordinances, and they have taken the step to bring their mapping assets online. And you can see that over here on the left-hand side of their code. They have a link directly to their interactive zoning map. And so I have that all open. This is what it would look like if you had your mapping assets online. And this is how people might use it. If I was looking to do business in the township of Upper Chichester, I might be looking to open up a restaurant. I want to know where I can open up that restaurant. So I'm simply going to look at their land uses. I'm going to say this is an eating and drinking establishment, and this quickly I can find that I could open my restaurant in Upper Chichester either in the neighborhood commercial district or in the highway commercial district. If I wanted to know more about either one of those, it's a simple click. I can read how the township describes this. I can look at all the important building dimensions that I need, setbacks and maximum building areas. And then for me, even better than that with Upper Chichester, I just love the way that they, on top of all of that, you can get all that information. You also have access to all the permits and forms that you would need. So if I was that economic developer and I want to do business in Upper Chichester, I can have all of my paperwork done before I meet with the planning and zoning land use people of Upper Chichester. So all of that can get done, and we can minimize that street traffic in and out of the offices and meeting with people, and at the same time, keep our project going. So online systems for all of our major important systems came to the front. And I'm stopping because I'm just thinking another one when I was talking to people that came to mind was the ability to pay online. And I didn't highlight that there. So I'll say this. Many of the municipalities who already had it in place to pay for permits or licenses online, it was that much more helpful for their public because they were already using it. It wasn't something that they had to teach them. Little addition there. Another thing that people said, and this was big, and you'll see it basically throughout now, hardware. Where the municipalities had enough phones for municipal use, enough laptops, then the stay-at-home order didn't hurt them all that bad at all. They were able to shut down their computers, grab their phone, grab their computer, and go home. Sure, it's different working from home, and you're sharing your office, as you can see around me, with your family. So it looks different, but in terms of what you need to do your job, when I fold it up, and I am fortunate, I have a laptop, I have a work phone, I had a working office at home. So municipalities absolutely said that. Where the right hardware wasn't in place, it was more of a struggle. Hand in hand with that, secure access and training in how to get to that secure access. So virtual private networks means secure access. Having your data available in the cloud and securely attaching to that, knowing what that meant, feeling comfortable with the use of it, training became a huge storyline. Again, sort of hand in hand with that, but people called it out because they had already made the transition to either G Suite or Microsoft 365, and people were used to using it. That was a big boon. I know for General Code, we made some of that transition for some of our users to Microsoft 365, and there's no question about it, and I'm sure everyone on the line is aware. When you make that transition to new technology, no matter how great it is or how easy it is to use, there is that learning curve that people have to come up and over. Let's do another poll. Eli, can you get us ready for that second poll? Now, in this one, it'll be a little bit different than the first one. I'm going to sort of list a bunch of things that I just talked about on that former slide, and I want you to select all that apply. What of these did you have in place, like say in February of 2020? Which of these were already in place for you. Again, select as many as apply to you. It's sort of interesting to get a feel for how many of us had access in what we had. So I'm seeing some of the answers come in now, and I don't know that you can, but very interestingly, so far, nobody has clicked on, we were prepared, we had a plan. That's interesting. Lots of good training results coming in. Lots of good social media presence also coming in, people saying they had that. Just so you know, I would have liked to put other responses down here, but GoToWebinar only gave me this many choices. So feel free at this point, if there were things that you had in place that were really helpful to you, write it if you would in the questions area, just so that we know. And hoping that this can be a great sharing opportunity. What worked for you? Awesome, thanks Eli. Close the poll, and now everyone can see the results. Very, very interesting. So the social media presence was strong among everyone here on our call today. So I think it's really interesting that nobody said they felt like they were prepared. It's interesting to think about, like if you do fast forward X number of years, wherever that's going to be, to our next emergency, how many of us will be able to say at that point, because of 2020, we were prepared in these ways that we weren't before. Awesome, thanks Eli. If you want to close that poll, I'll move on. So when I interviewed Chris McClure, one of the things, again, I'm just going to remind you a little bit, he's from Massachusetts and was talking about the fact that the Columbia gas crisis had helped North Andover get prepared for this. One of the things that happened at that time, they didn't have a strong social media presence. That's what he was telling me. And as a result of the Colombian gas crisis, they hired somebody part-time in 2018. And to just thumbnail it for you, it was like a 10-hour position, if I recall properly. By 2019, it was up to 19 hours a week. And now that person is a full-time equivalent, fully dedicated to their social media resources and making sure that the public is aware and has a good communication channel. Also, Chris would say, Chris was the one who said the reason that the stay-at-home order didn't affect him that much was preparedness, but unfortunately he had to live through the Colombian gas crisis to get to that place. All right, so the next question that I asked folks was sort of the flip side of what went especially well. What would you say are your top priorities for fixing or for giving attention to? So you're probably not going to be surprised by this. Many people said we really have to look at those systems that are available where we have remote access. We do have to look at both avenues. Who has the access? Is it municipal employees? Is it the public? And we have to think about who needs it and what would be the best thing to do moving forward. So I'm going to get out here to my browser and show you again the city of Corning. So the way that they were already prepared was they host all of their minutes right inside their code. So I'm going to give you a tiny tour of what I mean by that. You can tell by looking at this that they keep the minutes from all their various boards and commissions here. So what that allows is, I'm just going to select one. I can then click on any meeting. I can read those full meeting minutes. It's printable, it's downloadable. So whether I work for the city or I happen to live in the city, I have access to this. And again, it's not new, right? So we're used to coming here and getting our meeting minutes. One of the benefits that many people don't know about having them here is that it should be a huge time saver for mostly municipal employees, but anyone could do this, right? So I'm just, watch what I'm going to do here. I'm going to click right up here in where it says search. And I'm going to say, I wonder when's the first time the city started having to talk about COVID in their meeting minutes. I type in COVID. I get these results very quickly. You can tell by looking here, none of those results are in the code, not yet. There is one new law in the books regarding COVID, but there's 16 public documents. And if I click on that, I can say, well, there we were, February 18th, talking about the possibilities. And again, these are quick links. Again, I could open that, read it, and do what I needed to do. That searchability, so that you don't have to open up each minute independently, was a huge value for anyone who had their minutes available in a searchable fashion. Quickly go back. So the remote access to data was one thing that everyone said that they really had to go back and reevaluate. Another thing that people said was that desktop computers really needed to be phased out because they're awesome when you're able to get into your office and use it, and not so convenient when you need to pack up your desktop and take it someplace else. The ability with a laptop to close the lid and carry it like this and go home was invaluable. So people are saying that what needs attention is their hardware budgets going forward are going to have room to have additional hardware. The two types of hardware that came out the most often were computers and municipal phones, whenever people needed to have additional phones. I think it comes up later about software, yes. The other budget item would be in software. We need to make sure, one, that people have secure access and they know how to use it. So who's going to do the training? Making sure we have enough connections so that all the right people can, and then they know how to use it. Another thing that bubbled to the top is virtual meeting software, and I will highlight yet another municipality in a second where there's lots of lessons learned and lots of things in place, and oh my goodness, we've been talking about using remote meeting software for a long time, but we didn't do it until we had to. And then we did it. That's good. You know, again, that silver lining. We were resourceful. We did it, but it wasn't without a little bit of pain, right? And I'm sure everyone on the phone from IT is feeling that pain or felt that pain as we got moving into virtual meeting software. So not only software, which is what I put on here, because there's you got to pick one. There's a lot. You got to pick one. Then you got to learn how to use it. Paying for the virtual meeting software, as many of you might know, is pretty reasonable. That wasn't such a big deal, but in terms of your budgets, you might find that going forward, you're having to budget for better microphones or better cameras. You might find yourself having to get into a bigger room and you need the equipment that can accommodate the big room so that when you're televising your meetings, that people can see the appropriate people and resources and screens. So virtual meeting software, the ability to use it, and the hardware that sort of makes those meetings tick. And then finally, one that's not easy, for sure, the examination of all flows and work forms. And to put it bluntly, people were talking about, well, how did we get this done when we were in the office? And people would say, well, so-and-so would get up from their desk and go put it in someone else's inbox, and you know that, and that just kept the process going, and it worked well, and there's nothing the matter with it. And on one hand, there's no reason to change it until we can't anymore get up and go from one desk to another, and yet we still have to have that workflow go. So I know many organizations had to, you know, put their huddles together and talk about how did we used to do it. And given what resources we have now, what are we going to do? So thorough evaluation of those forms and workflows. And Eli, if I could have you put up that third and final poll. I'm curious to know, this is again, just choose one of these. What's at the top of your list? What in terms of your organization, what do you think you guys need to spend time on or preparation for the next emergency? Starting to see some responses come in here all over the board. Again, remember that I was limited. I can only put 5 on here. So if there was something else that's on your list, just jot it right down there in the questions pod. Eli and Michelle are taking care of watching that and making sure that they get all that information, and we'll share it with you at the end. Collecting responses is what it says. Pretty even, although, yeah, it is pretty even. Out front right now is online permitting and access to data and resources. And then again, pretty even, but a second would be training and needing to shore up virtual meeting resources. So that is very interesting. I'm happy to see that not a lot of people have hardware in the budget as a top priority, which means I'm hopeful that many people have what they need in place. They just need to perhaps implement it a little bit more efficiently. All right, awesome. Well, thank you for voting. Let's go ahead and close down that poll, Eli. And this one is going to make me chuckle because I had a very long conversation with this assistant township manager. And she also has her GIS mapping assets already online. So she had so much in place. And I just thought it was very interesting in our conversation when she said, Jean, honestly, our biggest challenge was the virtual meetings because she was exactly that situation. We'd been talking about it. We knew we were going to do it. It's not like it was off our radar. We just hadn't done it. So then when it came to the time, then it was coordinating the efforts of everyone in IT and then learning and then having to try to have these meetings without too many people in any one location at one time and having it go off without a hitch. So I don't know, I'm quickly looking. I don't know if Barbara's with us today, but I don't know if it necessarily the first meetings went out without a hitch. But I do know that they're doing it regularly, and so there is life after that. I just thought it was very interesting when they were so prepared on so many fronts. It was just this one thing, yeah, we'll do that. We'll get to that online meeting. We'll get to that. So I think many people struggled with the concept. So in finalizing my discussions with people, the last thing that I talked to them about was, when you look forward to the next emergency, what's at the top of your mind? What are you thinking to get prepared for it? And even though when I talk to people, I didn't get a ton of people saying the most important thing was being prepared because they didn't feel like they were, going forward, they absolutely want to have an emergency preparedness plan or a disaster recovery plan. So that was one thing people said. The other thing they absolutely said was evaluating which systems could be housed in the cloud as opposed to in our municipal offices. So one of the things that took some by surprise, I'm going to fall back on my experience when I was hosting those online meetings where I had a lot of residents come and ask questions. I was amazed at how many questions there were. Here we are in their code of ordinances, how many people came with building related questions and how many municipalities really have their building code available, searchable, readable online for people. We do have one that I can highlight, so I'm going to show it to you. Our good friends in the city of O'Fallon, Missouri do have access to all their building codes. So whenever anyone came into my calls from the city of O'Fallon, hot dog, I could help them with their building related information because I knew their codes were very accessible. So on your screen right now, you can see what I've done is just scroll so I could show you, here is the fire code for the city. I'm just going to highlight over here. You can see they have 17 notes in their code. So there's one next to all their important books. Their residential code, there's a link. Their building code, there's a link. Their existing building code, their plumbing code, right? So all that allows when you click that link is it takes you out to the International Code Council site. It opens up their book. Here we are looking at the fire code for the city of O'Fallon. And people could scroll through. If I knew what I was interested in looking at, and maybe it had something to do with smoke detectors, I could go right here to Chapter 7, Fire and Smoke Protection Features. I could search through that and read it. And this is what I can do in public. I'm going to show you. See, I'm not signed in here. I just have a link there. If I worked for the city, then I would have a special login that not only could I go to my fire code and see what it says, even if I didn't have the book with me at home, not only could I go there, but when I log in, then I can email out a piece of that code and send it to somebody if they had a question, if they were a builder or an inspector and they had a question, I could email it. I have all kinds of access. So by O'Fallon being ready in this way, they not only served their constituents and builders around the community, but they served themselves because they could continue work without having access to those books. So I did think to put a piece of that in our webinar today, because when we talk about which systems could be housed in the cloud, we really do have to think about all of those. One of the things that many people said to me is that they are looking into grants. They were doing it before. We're talking about continuity of operations. What grants are out there that would allow me for that, use money for continuity of operations? Also, data archiving. Since access to resources and data was so valuable, are there any grants out there? And as many of you know, I'm sure from the call, there is CARES Act money. And so people I know, I have been talking with people looking to assure themselves some piece of that CARES Act money in terms of getting prepared for the next time, or even in recovery of what's going on right now. Many people are putting their eggs in the basket of training staff. They need to make sure that people know how to use what they have with confidence and with security. And certainly communication channels, and I think we've talked a fair amount about that with respect to social media, but any community communication channels that need to be shored up, making sure that people can communicate was really, really valuable. So we're at the end of our presentation here. I'm going to leave this slide up like this, and then I'm going to say thank you everyone for coming. We'll say thank you very much for your time, and we'll be sending out a recording shortly.